good afternoon, buenas tardes, good evening, buenas noches, whenever it is that you get to see this. My name is Miss Adri, and I am here to teach you some stuff. And today we're going to talk about the writing process. Yes, this is something that we use all the time, and just a chef has to use different steps, different measurements, different things to create a recipe or to cook a delicious meal. Good writers use the steps of the writing process to publish a top quality piece of writing. And yes, I know some of you are going to say, huh? The writing process? What's that? Now, I wonder who remembers this? Who has seen these videos before, or who can remember some of the different steps of the writing process? I wonder. Let me put myself in a little corner over here. Are as follows. We have drafting, we have revising, we have editing and proofreading, and we have publishing and presenting. Some teachers, which is totally cool, they mix editing and revising together, or they do as I do and put editing and proofreading together. Some other people separate editing and proofreading, and instead of being 5 steps, there are 6. That's completely okay, completely all right. Doesn't really matter as long as all of these different steps are present. Now, I know some are saying, ay, Missy Adriana, why do we need to know this? We only use the writing process in English class. And I'm sorry, there's a little typo right there. That last week should be capitalized. And that is not true. You do not just use the writing process in English class or in Spanish class or whatever other language class that you take. You use the writing process every single day. Just like you use the scientific method. You don't believe me? Listen to this. I know most of you have social media out there. Don't lie. You all have at least an Instagram account, and most of you have a TikTok account. That's cool. That's totally fine. You use the writing process all the time when you are going to post on your social media. How so? Simple. The first thing that you do when you are going to make, let's say, a reel, a simple reel, you think, what am I going to do the reel about? Am I gonna just rant about something? Am I gonna do a trend? Am I going to use an audio that other people are using? That's pre-writing. That is pre-writing or brainstorming. So you're already doing that. Then once you decide that you are going to do this reel, you start thinking, how am I going to do this? I'm going to do that. That's drafting. Once you decide to do the video, following the audio, the trend, whatever it is that you did, you look at it and you go back and you observe it. That is revising. You might realize that you forgot to sync the audio correctly, or perhaps you didn't sync yourself correctly, and you go back and do it again. That's editing and proofing right there. See, revising, editing, and proofreading, they're all mixed up together. And then once you have the perfect reel, you publish it with the correct hashtags, with all of that. Did I not just use the writing process? Of course I did. Let's go into each one of the steps one by one. As I mentioned, the first one is pre-writing or brainstorming. We can call it whatever we want. It is totally cool. Let me see if I can make this, there we go, completely full screen for everybody's benefit. So I brainstorm my ideas. I pick the topic that I want to talk about or that was assigned to me. It could be sports, music, art, authors, movie review, whatever. And you think about what you already know, which is known as your background knowledge. And in order to aid you into this adventure, you create a graphic organizer. This is one of the typical oh my goodness, graphic organizers that we see in the classroom. The teacher puts the topic in the middle of the board, and then you do little circles or little strings. In Spanish, we call it el torbellino de ideas. We can call it like a word cloud. That really depends on your teacher or how you want to call it. But usually we make a little graphic organizer to help us out. Now, the question is, do I have to do a single graphic organizer or does it have to look like that? And the answer is no. My graphic organizer can be, let me move myself out of the way. It can be however you want to structure it. That's the cool thing about brainstorms or your pre-writing method. You can do whatever you want. Some people, this example that I have here, this person did a little drawing with things that they want to talk about. That's perfect. This other person here did candy, and the three things that they are going to concentrate are going to be the three main points in the essay. I'm guessing this is an essay that they want to talk about. That works too. Some people do list mixed with different things and trees. That's fine too. The important thing of a graphic organizer, your brainstorm organizer, is that it works for you. It doesn't have to work for anybody else except you. It doesn't have to work for the teacher. It doesn't have to work for your classmate. It just needs to work for you. The next step on this journey that we call the writing process, let me get my taskbar out of the way, is drafting. And this is when I actually start writing my piece. Sometimes we call it the rough draft. Sometimes we call it our sloppy copy, and that's completely cool. It needs to have a beginning, middle, and ending. What do we mean by that? Simple. It needs to have a very clear, this is where it starts, this is where I'm developing the important details, and this is how I'm ending it. You can include ideas from your brainstorm. Sometimes ideas that weren't in your brainstorm creep up into your essay or whatever it is that you're writing, and that's completely normal. You write incomplete sentences and thoughts in your paper in paragraph form. And remember that a paragraph is 5 sentences or more, always or more. And when you write your draft, you have to keep your audience in mind. Who is going to read this? Who is going to be interested in my topic? When we talk about who can read this, it is who is able to read this, because I'm not going to write a piece on let me think, different kings and queens of Europe, which is something that we would do perhaps already in seventh grade, eighth grade, high school, and give it to a kindergarten. No, we have to think who is physically and mentally able to read the piece and who is going to be interested in the topic. And it's not just the teacher. My next step in the writing process, let me ubicate myself close to this girl, is that I reread to make sure if my sentences make sense. I don't know if this has happened to you, but you start reading something and then you go, huh? What did I say there? ¿Qué dice ahí? As we sometimes say in Spanish. It is important when we revise that we know that it makes sense. Do I have clear details? Is there a very obvious beginning, middle, and end? Are there transitional words to help the writing flow smoothly? When I am revising, I ask myself, these are some ideas or some things that we can ask ourselves in idea and content. How clear are my ideas? How easy is it to follow my ideas? That would be in organization. Sentence fluency. Do I have to mix things around when I read the sentences aloud? Because sometimes we have to read aloud in order for our brain to get the connection if it's correct. Should I combine some short sentences? Where can I add more precise words? Are there any words that I should replace? Because this is something that happens to me quite often, and I have to use word reference or the dictionary, is that sometimes we repeat the same word to get our point across, and that happens a lot to us that are English as second language learners or speakers. That happens all the time, and it happens to people that speak English or any language as a first language. It just the way we work. And sometimes we have to use the same meaning but look for a synonym. And also in my voice, how natural does my writing sound? Does it sound like I'm interested in the topic, or does it sound robotic and just, I did this to get it out of the way? Next step is my editing and proofreading. And here is where I actually start to dissect my sloppy copy, and I look for errors in grammar, punctuation, capitalization, spelling, and I make sure that my paragraphs are indented. Indented, that just means that I leave a little bit of space between where my page begins and where my sentence begins. In Spanish, we call it a sangria. And when you edit, when you're already in the editing process, it's a good idea to tell somebody else to read it. It can be a friend, it can be a teacher, it can be somebody else. Because sometimes we work on a piece and you can have multiple drafts before you actually publish, because the writing process, let me go back to the slide. Oop. The writing process, as you can see, is something that it's cyclical. It basically, it's not that it never ends, but it can be a never ending cycle, because you can always publish and present and then realize that you have to fix something. But it's always going back and forth, back and forth. Many times we do our brainstorm, which is the pre-reading, as I mentioned. We draft, we revise, we edit and proofread, and then we go back to a draft until it's perfect. Let me go back. Once we are doing that, I have this little checklist that I always teach my students, and that it's a good idea to have. And it's very similar to what I showed you in the revising, but this is where I really get down to the nitty gritty. Did I spell everything correctly? Did I indent every single new paragraph? Did I eliminate any run-on sentences? And remember that run-on sentences are sentences that run on and on and on. Did I use my commas correctly? Do all of my subject and verbs agree? Did I capitalize the names of people, places, and the first word of every sentence, and the pronoun I forgot to mention that one. Are the verb forms and tenses correct? This is not the same as my subject and verbs agreeing, because when we talk about subject and verb agreeing, is that if I have a singular subject, my verb has to be the same amount, has to be a singular one. When we talk about the verb forms and the tenses, is did I spell the verbs correctly in the time that I am talking about, and does every sentence have a punctuation mark? Many times you're going to see versions of this, and these are little editing marks. These are the most simple ones that you can use to get yourself on track, or sometimes your teacher is going to use them to keep you on track, so you know what you have to do, if you have to delete, if you have to fix your spelling, etc. And the last step, woohoo, we made it, is the publishing and presenting step. And this is your final draft. This is your best effort. This is where neatness counts. You can include an illustration if you want. It should be done in your best penmanship or on the computer. I recommend that your sloppy copies are done by hand, because it's easier to correct sometimes for teachers, and your last copy be on the computer. That way the spell checking is easier, etc. And there it's ready to share with the world. And a published document can be anything from a book, a research paper, a blog, which is a written log, or a vlog, which is a video log, that's the difference, and an article in a magazine. And that's it. That is the writing process. This was a quick little recap of the writing process. My name is Miss Adri, and I hope that I taught you something or refreshed something that was already in your noggin with this video. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on all of my social media platforms. You'll see them after my face. Bye!